There is a lot of talk right now about the polar vortex, a big Arctic outbreak, and bad weather, but there are some mixed signals. The North Atlantic Oscillation going positive, which is not great for bringing cold air south. Without that, we get more of a cyclonic arc in the trajectory of the polar air as it comes south. The model is also not locking into a positive P&A pattern. Again, that's not particularly conducive either. But we certainly don't need the full constellation for things to align for a brief, intense, bitter cold spell, particularly in the Midwest and Great Lakes. But it is the persistent, long-lived cold waves that are a little bit less likely. Let's start out first with the surface map. We've got high pressure dominating much of the weather around the country. This western U.S. system in the Great Basin area, that's going to be a plateau high. That is also some modifying Pacific air, which has become entrenched across the western states. This other high-pressure area, that's of Canadian origin, which has dropped down south over the past few days and produced some very cool weather in the deep south and in Texas. But the flow is starting to become westerly. We're getting that downslope. Adiabatic warming, temperatures coming up nicely into the 50s all the way up there into Nebraska. Another surge of cold air coming south. But we can see that the temperatures behind that cold front are really not very cold, looking at 30s and 40s. So that is not Arctic air. The Arctic air we're looking for is way up there in northern Canada, and a lot of it still has yet to develop over western and central Canada. But still up to the north, temperatures below minus 20 to minus 30. And if we look a little bit further north, high pressure over the Arctic ice pack. So that is certainly a sign of things to come. Heading back into the U.S., starting with the northeastern U.S., ridging, starting to build into the eastern Great Lakes, the area under westerly flow. Lake effect snow showers are ongoing, and also quite a bit of cold air advection in place. That is starting to diminish as the ridge builds in from the west. Cold weather across the northeastern U.S., temperatures in the teens in the mountains, 20s inland, and 30s on the coast from Boston to the Carolinas. Winter weather advisory for Lake Ontario, Utica, Syracuse to just east of Rochester, expiring tonight, expecting 3 inches. In Lake Erie, in the Snowbelt region, we have lake effect snow warnings continuing through late tonight. 1 to 3 inches of snow possible, with up to 5 inches near Erie. Winter weather advisories all through western Pennsylvania and eastern Ohio into tonight. 1 to 3 inches with convective snow bands. You can see those developing as we get just a little bit of heating in that part of the U.S. And a winter storm warning for West Virginia for tomorrow as that weather system from the Great Lakes drops southeastward. We are looking for another cold night tonight, single digits, teens, and a few 20s along the East Coast. The water vapor satellite imagery showing this fast-moving Canadian clipper moving into the central Great Lakes this evening. That's where it's located at the current time. Most of the dynamic lift from the lower Michigan Peninsula up into central Ontario. However, snow totals will be on the light side, looking at about 4 to 5 inches on the exposed northwestern coast of lower Michigan and up to 7 inches in the northern, or I should say northeastern part of the Michigan UP. The southeastern regions cloudy in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of this cloud is associated with the southern stream of the polar front jet. Temperatures this afternoon running from the 30s and 40s in North Carolina, 50s throughout the deep south and Gulf Coast region, and up to the 60s and 70s in the Florida Peninsula. Similar situation for Texas. Downslope flow starting to set up there in West Texas, eroding that snow on the ground west of Amarillo. We had 60s this afternoon across central Texas. The hot spot last time I checked was 64 at Marble Falls, west of Austin. A lot of cloud down there in the lower Rio Grande Valley, 50s with stratus and fog, all the way down to Brownsville and McAllen. Cyclonic circulation off the Texas coast, so increasing baroclinicity in that region, and you can see some upslope flow all the way into the Sierra Madres around Monterey. The northern plains catching the tail end of that wave coming out of Minnesota and Ontario. As we mentioned, an increase in snow overnight from Wisconsin into Michigan, but further to the west, a lot of warm weather actually, 50s into West Kansas, into southwestern Nebraska as well, 40s all the way into the Dakotas and into Montana, so that's probably taken a toll on the snow cover as well. Minnesota and Iowa still in the 20s and 30s. As we get that change of air masses that warm up, some strong west winds starting to pick up, and that's raising blowing snow in parts of North Dakota, Fargo and Grand Forks into Minnesota this evening. That should diminish towards morning. In the Rockies, high wind warnings from Cheyenne to Rawlins, west winds up to 70 miles an hour. And parts of Montana around Great Falls, they have high wind warnings for tomorrow. West winds gusting to 80 miles an hour. Interstate 15 from Conrad to Shelby up to the Canadian border, getting some very strong west winds, and that will be a hazard for trucking on that freeway. Mild conditions across the southwest this evening. 70s in the lower deserts, 73 at Phoenix, Tucson 68. In the Four Corners, upper 30s and lower 40s due to strong radiational cooling overnight on that high Intermountain Plateau. Wind advisory expired today in the Colorado River Basin, Lake Mead down to Lake Havasu City. They had north winds gusting to 50 miles an hour. Mild in California, low 60s in the San Joaquin Valley, low to mid 70s in Southern California. Red flag warnings continue into early evening, except the Los Angeles downtown area, the coastal areas of Orange County and San Diego. That red flag warning expires over the next couple of hours. Not sure if that's going to be reissued, but those Santa Ana winds are ramping down. In the northwestern U.S., under the influence of that stagnant anticyclone, lots of fog and stratus from Puget Sound into the Willamette Valley and into the interior regions of the Columbia River Valley. It is continued cool under that fog and stratus, low to mid 40s there, 50s in the foothills east of the Cascades, Crater Lake and Bend. But in the eastern Great Basin, cool conditions, 37 for a high at Salt Lake City, 29 at Pocatello, and 32 at Rock Springs. Air stagnation advisories through tomorrow morning across the Snake River Valley, the southern Oregon valleys, and Willamette Valley, and that will continue on into Friday in the Snake River Valley. And that comprises our summary of weather in the lower 48. Was that a little bit long? Too much information? Let me know in the comments. I know a lot of us like to get right to that forecast. Heading out into the Pacific, we do have one system moving into the southeastern peninsula of Alaska, the Panhandle. We have had winter weather advisories today in the central Panhandle. Those should be expiring about now, up to 3 inches of snow and mixed precip. High wind warnings further south where you see that pressure gradient packed together, the isobars very close to one another. That's bringing southeast winds up to 60 miles an hour. Further north, a winter storm expected to slam into western Alaska later in the week. Friday and Saturday, winter storm warnings, winter weather advisories posted in that area from the Kuskokwim River to Nome and into the foothills of the Brooks Range, basically this area right here. Further to the east into Canada, as we mentioned, most of the bitterly cold air up there in the Canadian high Arctic. We do have snowfall warnings in effect for much of the central Canadian region, basically this corridor right here. As this weather system moves inland, we will have a track of heavy snow, 4 to 10 inches within that red corridor. That includes Fort Liard, Fort Nelson, High Level, Fort McMurray, La Ronge, Flin Flon, The Pass, and Lake Winnipeg. Further south, Edmonton, Whitecourt, Grand Prairie under snow squall watches for tomorrow morning. Could see some locally heavy snows with very gusty westerly winds. Cardston to Lethbridge, south to the U.S. border, under wind warnings for 60-mile-an-hour westerly gusts. And about the only other problems in Canada, lake effect snows on the northeastern Great Lakes and in the eastern shores of Lake Superior, 2 to 6 inches expected there. All right, let's take a look at those upper air dynamics. We're going to focus on the large scale, and what we see here is a long wave trough in the eastern U.S., long wave ridging in the Rockies, and that breaks down further into a cutoff high across Northern California, supporting that very stagnant weather pattern there. Cutoff low off of California, in fact, 2 lobes as you go down even lower in scale. There it is right there. Those are probably involved in kind of a Fujiwara effect. And this is actually producing what we call a Rex block. Cutoff low south of a cutoff high. And that is a blocking pattern. In Texas, we've got this trough moving southeastward. It is a dry trough, not very much reflection at the surface. In fact, the skies are rather clear across Texas and Oklahoma. Then we go into the remainder of the week. There's that Fujiwara effect in Southern California. The rest of the country under this northwesterly flow. And as we go into the weekend, that trough or that cutoff low opens up and becomes a trough in the southwestern U.S. Now we've got the cold air advection into the northern U.S. And this is where we have to pay close attention to the dynamics, because these jet maxes, these short waves, all that stuff moving through the flow can bring rounds of snow flurries and even snowstorms. So we don't know exactly how the moisture and dynamics are going to line up this far out, but we could see some snow flurries as that wave moves very quickly to the east, and you could see more of them coming in from the northwest. All of those could spin up cyclogenesis at the surface and the development of precip fields. All of that does bring the potential for snow if conditions are cold enough. Anyway, we'll take a look on Friday, and we should have a more accurate reading on all of this. However, let's take a look at the thermal fields, starting with Canada. The orange colors really capture our interest. Also, the aqua. Orange is going to be minus 30, minus 40. Aqua is minus 10 to minus 20 Fahrenheit. So as we go forward into Thursday and Friday, not much down in Canada itself. Some of that aqua starting to come into the Northwest Territories, Yellowknife and Uranium City. Now we're building in the minus 30s and minus 40s into southern Nunavut. You can see that slipping south into Manitoba for Saturday, and the aqua is coming into the northern plains. So this is basically advecting straight south. The pressures out to the west, not really all that impressive, 1048 millibars. However, by Sunday and Monday, those oranges starting to pop up out there in North Dakota and just north of International Falls. Aqua is coming pretty deep into the U.S., oranges up to the north, and then we start seeing downslope warming, some erosion of that Arctic air there in the Northwest Territories. So I'm not really seeing a 1-2 punch type thing going on. Of course, a lot of that could change between now and then. But here's one punch coming in straight from that same area, Nunavut, but that appears to be poised to head mostly into the Great Lakes and the northeastern U.S. See that? I think that's that positive NAO pattern, the positive North Atlantic Oscillation, driving things cyclonically into the northeastern U.S. and eastern Canada. And let's take a look at the temperatures in the U.S. Not much for Thursday, not much for Friday, but this is where we start seeing things changing as we go into Friday evening. See that? There's that polar air coming south, the freezing line indicated by the purple, the 20-degree line, and the 0 line. So that's all on its way south. There's the aquas showing up for Saturday evening. Then we go into Sunday and then Monday morning. Monday will be very cold across much of the country east of the Rockies. And Tuesday morning will be extremely cold again for much of the eastern U.S. 1050 millibar high across Kansas. Aqua's up to the north. That's going to be well below zero, probably -10 to -20. The 20-degree line all the way down to Atlanta, possibly down to the Red River, maybe even Dallas-Fort Worth, and a lot of that cold air infiltrating the Continental Divide area, the Four Corners, and parts of the Great Basin. And you can see some of that cold air becoming anchored in those valleys. So a continuation of that plateau high in that part of the country throughout the remainder of the week. Then we go into the late part of next week, a moderating trend, and then the second round of cold air sweeps through the Great Lakes area for maybe Friday the 24th. Coastal low being indicated by the GFS, so we'll see about that. So let's go ahead and put those maps into motion. The fronts, those are analyzed by myself, so you can have some confidence that those fronts are where they need to be. So we've got this fast-moving Alberta Clipper moving through Michigan, Indiana, overnight, and then into the eastern states for tomorrow. This is where we have that winter storm watch or winter storm warning in effect for West Virginia as that passes through. Improving conditions as that ridge moves in from the west. Downslope conditions in Montana down to Colorado. So kind of a mild day across much of the country. As we go into evening, here's this Pacific system moving inland. And that'll link up with another wave further to the north and help usher in that cold air. So here is the start of it for early Friday. And then we go into Friday morning and then Friday afternoon. Now we've got full-fledged cold air advection into Minnesota, the Dakotas, even into Wyoming, even into Idaho. So pretty large aerial extent on that. 40s and low 50s for highs as we get that last warm day before the storm. Cold air advection up to the north, and we're going to see lots of 70s in the southern plains, all the way from the Big Bend up to Childress, Abilene, and Wichita Falls. Then for Friday night and Saturday, the big cool down front barreling through Oklahoma into North Texas. Early Saturday, cold air advection through a huge area all the way back to Nevada. You can see snow showers around the Wasatch Range into the Rockies for midday on Saturday. Morning lows will be in the single digits across Minnesota and the Dakotas, and highs will be in the single digits and even below zero in northern North Dakota. 20s from Chicago to Kansas City and down to Dodge City. And it gets colder going into Sunday. Massive cold air advection through the country. This will be the coldest day so far this year for much of the Midwest and Great Lakes. Rochester, Minnesota, Watertown, all below zero. Minneapolis, a high of -4. Fargo, a high of -8. Bismarck, -3. Denver, Colorado Springs, Trinidad will all go below zero. And it gets even worse for Monday. There's the core of that polar air. Sub-zero conditions from Madison to Sioux Falls, Rapid City, below -10 across all of northern Minnesota, eastern North Dakota. They just don't get a break. Out west, we're looking for highs of 6 degrees at Denver, 9 degrees at Trinidad, but rather shallow, so this will all erode pretty quickly. Then we go into Tuesday, another big cold day across much of the country. -20s in northern Minnesota, eastern North Dakota, sub-zero lows to western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, southern Illinois, Kansas City, Dodge City, all of that below zero. This will be the coldest morning in Colorado. -10 at Denver, -13 at Colorado Springs, possibly down to -30 at Steamboat Springs. Also the coldest morning in the Four Corners area, down to 10 degrees at Albuquerque, 5 at Santa Fe, -1 at Gallup, and 5 at Flagstaff. The freeze line will run from Jacksonville to Panama City and into parts of South Texas. And there you can see some snow possibly developing in South Texas, Houston to San Antonio. The actual area of extent, we don't really know this far off. We'll check on that on Friday. And it will be very cold in the northeast. We're looking for single-digit highs in the northeastern U.S. mountains. And then we go into Wednesday, and this will be characterized by some bitterly cold air in the northeastern U.S. In fact, why don't we just look at those temperatures? These are going to be highs on Wednesday. Yep, single digits in the mountains, teens from Boston down to Philadelphia. And overnight lows are going to be brutal, down to 0, just north of Albany, around Saratoga Springs, all the way down into central Pennsylvania and down to Charleston. And that's probably a good place to stop for tonight. We don't really know all the details for midweek next week. We'll take a closer look at that on Friday, and that'll start coming within range. All right, we are looking at some cold weather, at least we know that for sure. So I hope you all have a great Wednesday evening and Thursday, and we'll see you back here on Friday for another edition of Forecast Lab. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.